Have you ever entered a room and noticed how people react before you've even said a word? They look your way, not with recognition, but with unease, as if they're aware of something they can't quite place. You didn't do anything. You didn't try to command attention, but something in the atmosphere changes, subtle but unmistakable. That shift, it's not about charisma, it's not charm or beauty or social intelligence. It's something older, deeper. You're carrying a type of energy that makes the air around you feel heavier, makes people stand straighter, makes conversations stutter for a second. This isn't a learned trait or a cultivated performance. It's something inherent, an internal presence that moves before you do. Some are drawn toward it, others pull away, but most don't even understand why they're reacting. They just feel it. That's the thing about this kind of presence. It doesn't ask to be seen, it just is. It's not a spotlight, it's a gravity. People aren't staring because they admire. They're bracing because they sense. There's something within you that acts like a silent current, pulling unconscious attention in your direction, whether you want it or not. It doesn't come from social status or from how well you present yourself. It's a vibration that hums beneath the surface, built from layers of personal reckoning, silent suffering, truths you've faced that most refuse to touch. This energy you carry is not loud, but it's undeniably powerful, and it makes people uncomfortable, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your very being disrupts the false equilibrium they live inside. Most of the world operates in shallow waters, smiles that don't reach the eyes, conversations that skim the surface, questions asked without real curiosity. But when someone like you enters the room, it disturbs that illusion. Without speaking, you remind people of things they've tried to forget. Your presence doesn't shout, it doesn't posture, but it reveals, and people aren't ready to see what's under their masks. You may have been called intense, you might have heard that you feel like a lot, but those descriptions aren't about who you are. They're about what you awaken in others. You notice things they don't want to notice in themselves. You reflect back things they're trying hard to bury. You carry a kind of emotional clarity that disrupts the fog they live in. This isn't about being intimidating in any conventional sense. It's about truth. And truth, when it shows up uninvited, causes discomfort. You don't point fingers. You don't need to. Just being near you makes people aware of the dissonance inside themselves. And because they don't know how to face that dissonance, they project. That's when the labels start. Too serious, too distant, too much. But these are just defense mechanisms. They're not criticisms of who you are. They're signs that your presence is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Stir the sleeping parts of people awake. You've probably experienced this since you were young. Feeling things no one else seemed to feel. Sensing dishonesty behind practiced words. Picking up emotional tension when everyone else was laughing. Crowds may exhaust you, not because you dislike people, but because you absorb everything. Not just what's visible, but what's hidden. Not just what's said, but what's felt. This emotional awareness isn't a burden, but it's not an easy gift either. It can isolate you, it can make you feel like you're carrying something no one else understands, and in truth, you are. You're tuned into a deeper frequency, one that resonates with unspoken pain, unprocessed memory, and the intangible threads that connect human experience beneath the surface. Most people navigate their lives in avoidance, dodging discomfort, numbing reality, clinging to roles. But you can't play those games. You see through them, and that vision doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you tired. Because sometimes, no matter how gently you speak, no matter how much space you give, your very presence still makes people confront parts of themselves they're desperate to keep hidden. You may have tried to soften this part of yourself. You may have adjusted your tone, made yourself smaller. practiced being more agreeable, but it doesn't work. Because the energy you carry is not something that can be hidden. It's part of your core, and the more you try to dilute it, the more you suffer. Because that pressure, the one that people feel around you, it's not a flaw, it's evidence that you're awake. Your presence acts like a mirror, but not the kind that reflects appearance. It reflects essence, and essence is harder to look at. When someone sees themselves in you, not their face, but their truth, they often recoil. Not because of you, but because of what they see. And so you find yourself navigating this strange paradox. People are drawn to you, but they don't stay. They open up, then disappear. They compliment you, then criticize the very traits they admired. It's not rejection, it's resistance. They are not saying, "You're too much." They are saying, "I'm not ready." And it hurts, it's lonely, because you know your intentions are good. You know you're offering presence, not pressure. But still, you watch people shift around you like your silence is too loud, your truth too sharp, your gaze too direct. But you didn't choose this role. You simply chose not to lie. You didn't decide to make people uncomfortable. You just decided not to live numbly. And that choice, however quiet, however personal, is radical in a world built on pretense. You may have a deep sense that you've always carried something, a weight you couldn't define. It's not quite grief, not exactly fear. It's more like awareness without explanation, a knowing that doesn't come from experience but from somewhere deeper. It's as if you remember something that hasn't been taught to you, like your soul held onto an old truth while the rest of the world forgot it. You walk into rooms and sense undercurrents before anyone else. You feel when something's off, even when no one said a word. You can tell when a person's smile is hiding something, even if they haven't admitted it to themselves. That insight can make you feel out of sync, not because you're wrong, but because you're right too soon. Others move through life waiting for signs, explanations, proofs. You feel the signal before the noise. That sensitivity doesn't make you weak. It makes you receptive. And receptivity, when paired with depth, creates an aura that is unmistakable. People with this kind of frequency often feel older than their age, not in body but in soul, as if time gave you lessons before it gave you language. You ask different questions, not "how do I succeed," but "what's the point of this ritual?" Not "how do I fit in," but "why does this feel hollow?" That search leads you towards silence, not because you're antisocial, but because silence holds a kind of truth that noise can't reach. You'd rather hear someone say something real than something pleasant. You'd rather be alone with meaning than surrounded by meaningless comfort. That craving for authenticity can feel like a curse, because it disconnects you from what's common. But it's also a compass. It points you toward what matters, toward depth, toward truth, toward your own integrity. You don't chase attention. You chase understanding. You don't follow trends. You follow resonance. And that's why others can't figure you out. You're not running their race. You're not playing their game. You're not moved by applause. You're moved by meaning. And meaning doesn't always come with companions. Sometimes it leads you into solitude, not because you're unlovable, but because you can't fake love. Not because you're cold, but because you refuse to warm to lies. There's a kind of solitude that grows not from rejection, but from clarity. You see too much to stay asleep. You know too much to pretend. That solitude can ache, but it also births the most honest version of you. There have probably been moments where you tried to explain this feeling, to put it into words, to tell someone that there's something different about how you experience the world, but the words never quite fit. You might have been told you're overthinking, too emotional, too sensitive. But those judgments are made by people who haven't met their own depths. They measure you by standards that don't apply. Because what you carry can't be quantified. It can't be summarized in a label or reduced to a diagnosis. It's not a flaw, it's not a superiority, it's a signal that your path is meant to go deeper. Not above others, but beneath the surface of things. Your life isn't about proving worth. It's about embodying truth. Not the truth others demand, but the kind you feel in your gut. The kind that doesn't need confirmation. The kind that stays even when everything else changes. That presence you carry is rare, not because you're chosen, but because you chose. You chose to feel, to notice, to remember. You chose to stay awake. And in a world designed to keep people asleep, that choice makes you uncommon. You don't need to be louder, or simpler, or easier to understand. You just need to keep being what you already are. Real. That's the thing people can't describe about you. That's the thing they remember, even when they forget your name. It's the thing that lingers in the room after you leave. The thing they can't shake, but don't know how to hold. Because you're not just a person, you're an experience. And experiences like you don't happen often. There's something about the way people speak to you that doesn't match the surface of the conversation. They may begin with pleasantries, routines, harmless chatter, but as the moments pass, something in their demeanor changes. Their tone softens or tightens. Their words grow more revealing, as if guided by an invisible hand into deeper territory, and they start saying things they weren't planning to say. They share regrets they usually hide. They reveal memories they haven't touched in years, not because you're prying, not because you're asking anything of them, but because being in your presence makes hiding feel unnecessary, or worse, unbearable. It's not what you say, it's not even how you listen, it's simply how you are. Something about your silence creates a kind of emotional pressure that cracks the surface of their performance. And in that space, the armor slips, the truth leaks out, even if it's subtle, even if it only lasts a moment. They walk away lighter but confused, stirred but speechless. It's as though they were standing beside a window they didn't know existed, and now they can't unsee what it showed them. You didn't offer a solution. You didn't give advice. You didn't even intend to hold space, but you did. Because you can't help it. There is something about your presence that breaks the spell most people live under. They come close to you and begin remembering things they've spent years trying to forget. They might not thank you. They may never say a word about it. But it happens nonetheless. You are the kind of person others confide in and then vanish from, not because you scared them, but because what they touched in your presence scared them. When someone is used to performing, used to pretending, used to playing out a script, your energy reminds them of the truth behind the curtain. And standing in that kind of truth, even for a few seconds, can feel like too much. You've likely had people pour their hearts out to you and then disappear without explanation. It feels strange. One moment they're revealing their soul. The next they're gone. You wonder if you said something wrong, if you overstepped, but you didn't. What you did was reflect something back to them that they weren't ready to face. People often misinterpret the way they feel around you. They say you're intense or mysterious or overwhelming, but those are just the names they give to unfamiliar sensations. What they're really feeling is themselves, more clearly, more honestly, more nakedly than they're used to, and they don't know what to do with that. You don't wield this effect deliberately. You don't set out to break people open. It just happens because you don't play pretend. You don't mirror what's convenient. You mirror what's real, and real is rare. Real is rare because it's raw, and raw is not easy to digest. This is the unseen toll of having a presence like yours. You become a space where people confront the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding, and then, often without warning, they vanish. Not because you hurt them, but because you reminded them. And that reminder isn't always welcome. You hold a kind of depth that doesn't fit into casual encounters. You bring a level of awareness into conversations that most people reserve for private thought. And when your presence triggers that shift, they either lean in or recoil. There is very little middle ground. You've probably noticed how polarizing you can be. People either feel drawn to you like a lighthouse, or they retreat as if burned. Either way, you're remembered. Either way, you're felt. There's a particular ache that comes with being someone others can open up to, but who rarely gets opened up to in return. You provide safety without asking for it. You listen without demanding reciprocation. You feel everything while others stay numb. And because of that, the emotional labor piles up in silence. It's not that people mean to use you. They just don't realize what you're doing. They don't know how much of their unspoken pain you carry home with you. They don't know how their revelations echo in your body long after the words have stopped. You may find yourself needing more solitude than others, not because you're anti-connection, but because connection for you is always full-bodied. You don't skim the surface, you dive, and diving takes energy. So you retreat, not to hide, but to recover. There's also the confusion of being misunderstood. You communicate with more than words. You speak through presence, tone, stillness, and intuition, and while some can sense that, most cannot. They try to understand you through conventional frameworks, and those frameworks fail. Your silence might be read as disinterest. Your gaze might be labeled confrontational. Your calmness might be misinterpreted as arrogance. And in those misreadings, your truth gets distorted. It's a strange thing to speak with clarity and still be misunderstood, to mean well and be received poorly, but it happens. And it happens often, because most people don't listen with their hearts. They listen with assumptions. They don't hear what you're saying. They hear what they expect to hear. And when you say something unexpected, something real, they freeze. Because now they have to reevaluate the entire framework. You're not being difficult. You're not being obscure. You're simply being, and that's enough to throw people off. Because your being isn't performative. It isn't curated. It isn't modified to suit the moment. And that, in a world built on roles and scripts, makes you hard to categorize. But being uncategorizable isn't a flaw. It's a sign of inner coherence. You're not scattered. You're integrated. You're not confusing. You're whole. And wholeness doesn't always look how people expect it to. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's intense. Sometimes it's unshakably still in the middle of chaos. But it is always rooted. And people feel that, even if they can't explain it. They feel something ancient in you, something grounded, something that doesn't shift based on external approval. And that kind of presence disorients people who rely on validation for identity. They may admire you for it, but they also struggle to understand you, because you remind them of a version of themselves they haven't become yet. There's a saying that people don't fear the dark. They fear what the dark reveals. You are not the darkness. You are the light that shows what the darkness was hiding, and for many that light is too much. They pull back, not because of who you are, but because of what they see in themselves when you're around. Some may attempt to change you. They will ask you to soften, to adjust, to become more palatable, not because they hate who you are, but because who you are challenges the story they're telling about themselves. They want you to be easier, Not because you're hard, but because truth is heavy and they haven't built the muscle to carry it. You've likely encountered people who were drawn to you for your depth, then tried to clip your wings, who were fascinated by your insight, then tried to limit your expression. They didn't realize that what they were in love with was your authenticity. And authenticity cannot be tamed. When you refuse to shrink, when you stayed true to your internal compass, they called you difficult, too serious, too intense, but they weren't criticizing you. They were revealing that they weren't ready for the real. That's the cycle you've been caught in, being sought out for your honesty, then punished for not performing, being valued for your clarity, then resented for not bending. But you didn't come here to be a mirror of other people's comfort. You came here to be real, and real, though rare, is what the world needs. People are used to being able to shape others into roles. They try to do that with you, but you don't fit. You don't bend. You don't fade into the expectations they've created, and when they realize they can't mold you, they feel threatened. But that threat is imagined. It's not you, it's their own limitations becoming visible. You've probably asked yourself many times if something is wrong with you. Why people walk away after being so close. Why they act confused or distant after being so open. But it's not a flaw in your being. It's a reflection of their readiness. You didn't do too much. You simply showed up as yourself. And for some, that is more than they can handle. But don't let that make you small. Don't let that convince you to become less. The world doesn't need more performance. It needs more presence. And you are presence in its truest form. You are not here to entertain. You are not here to be liked. You are here to offer what is real. And real is enough. When people leave you without explanation, remember, they're not walking away from you. They're walking away from the version of themselves they saw reflected in you. They may not understand that in the moment, but eventually they will. Because people don't forget the one who saw them before they were ready to be seen. They don't forget the person who held up a mirror and said nothing, but still showed them everything. And even if they never return, your impact stays. You are not ordinary, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are beneath everything you do. Your very existence carries the weight of honesty, and that weight is felt by everyone you meet, whether they admit it or not. So when you feel isolated, when you feel misunderstood, when you wonder why you're always the one holding space, remember this. What you carry is not a curse. It's a kind of resonance, a vibration that tunes people to their own frequency, whether they're ready or not. You don't need to change to make others comfortable. You don't need to explain to be valid. You don't need to perform to be worthy. You just need to keep walking your path, with the quiet knowing that your presence is a gift, even when it's unrecognized. And in time, those who are meant to walk beside you will arrive, not because you bent to meet them, but because they rose to meet you. You've probably spent a lot of your life feeling like you don't quite fit. Not in a dramatic or attention-seeking way. It's quieter than that, more of a low hum in the background of everything. You're standing in a group laughing with the rest, and yet there's a part of you hovering just above it, quietly observing, not fully immersed. You go to the party, attend the meeting, engage in conversation, but the sense persists. Something about this doesn't feel like home. It's not that you dislike people. It's not even that they've rejected you. It's that there's a frequency you're tuned into that most others can't hear. And when you're surrounded by surface-level connection, small talk and unspoken expectations, the dissonance becomes exhausting. You play the part. You've learned how to nod at the right times, laugh when it's appropriate, ask polite questions. But behind the social choreography, you're still waiting, waiting for something real, waiting for someone to see you, not as a collection of traits, but as an entire being, waiting for a moment that doesn't feel scripted. You've probably tried to adjust over the years. You observed how others talk, how they joke, how they build connection. And you did your best to mimic that rhythm, not out of dishonesty, but survival. Belonging is a powerful pull. And for a while you might have convinced yourself you'd finally found your place. But then the moment comes. That strange inner silence, that sudden flicker of disconnection, the realization that once again you're surrounded by people, but not truly with them. This experience isn't a reflection of your failure, it's the signature of depth. When you carry a heightened awareness, you can't fully dissolve into environments that are built on performance. You feel the undercurrents. You notice the gaps between what's said and what's meant. You pick up the subtle tension in a smile, the stiffness in someone's voice, the absence in their presence. Most people are experts at blending in. You were never wired that way. Not because you're unwilling, but because your perception won't allow you to. People might call you sensitive, or intense, or hard to read. But what they're really reacting to is the fact that you don't fully play the game. You're not hostile, you're just not invested in pretending, and that alone sets you apart. Because in a world where most people feel safer in roles than in reality, authenticity can be unnerving. You walk through life with the feeling that you're meant for something beyond what's in front of you. Not necessarily something bigger in the traditional sense, fame, wealth, status, but something more complete. Something that connects to the root of who you are. There's a whisper inside you that keeps asking for more. Not more material, but more meaningful. Not louder experiences, but deeper ones. And the more you try to ignore it, the more restless you become. It can be a painful contradiction, the desire to connect and the inability to settle for imitation. You want to be close to people, but you can't unsee their avoidance. You crave real dialogue, but find yourself in rooms filled with distraction. You offer sincerity and watch it bounce off the polished masks of others. And so, a distance forms, not because you pushed them away, but because you wouldn't pretend with them. That's the difficult reality of being someone who sees clearly in a world trained to look away. The more honest you become with yourself, the harder it becomes to engage in environments built on avoidance. Your eyes can't unsee the emptiness behind the noise. Your body can't relax into conversations that stay safe and shallow. You feel the absence of presence, even when a room is full. This doesn't make you broken. It doesn't mean you're incapable of joy or connection. It means you experience those things differently. You value moments that others overlook. You notice silences that others ignore. You crave interactions that are real, even if they're brief, over ones that are long and hollow. And that craving shapes your relationships, your choices, your path. There's a loneliness that comes with this depth. Not the loneliness of isolation, but the loneliness of rarity. You speak a language few are fluent in. You feel at a frequency that doesn't match the volume of most people's lives. And so, even when you are surrounded, part of you remains untranslated. You may have tried to explain this to others. You may have said, "I just feel things more," or, "I don't know, it's like I'm watching instead of participating." But those explanations rarely land. They get brushed aside, or minimized, or pathologized, because what you're describing can't be understood by someone who hasn't felt it themselves. So you stop explaining. You smile through the misunderstanding. You become quieter in groups, Not because you lack opinions, but because you sense they won't be received with the care they deserve. You keep your truth folded neatly inside you, waiting for a space that can hold it. And in the meantime, you keep walking, not bitter, not resentful, just quietly committed to something more honest. That commitment often puts you at odds with collective culture. While others celebrate speed, you crave stillness. While others chase visibility, you seek understanding. While others follow formulas, you search for resonance. And because of that, the world can feel distant, even when you're standing in the middle of it. People might try to pull you into their rhythm. They'll tell you to lighten up, to be more easygoing, to stop overanalyzing. But what they don't realize is that you're not analyzing. You're sensing, feeling, listening with your whole body. They don't realize that your depth isn't something you chose. It's something you've always carried. It's not elitism. It's not detachment. It's the natural result of seeing life without filters. Once you've seen the mechanics behind a performance, you can't pretend to enjoy the show. And once you've tasted genuine presence, every imitation becomes unbearable. But despite all this, you keep showing up. You keep listening. You keep hoping that somewhere, someone else is carrying this same depth, that another person is walking through the same fog, asking the same questions, feeling the same ache. And maybe one day, your paths will cross. Maybe you'll lock eyes across a crowded room and feel that unmistakable stillness, the recognition that you're not alone in your way of seeing. Until then, you walk between worlds, the outer world of routine and social rhythm, and the inner world of silence and soul. You are fluent in both, but you belong fully to neither. And that tension, that stretch, is not a mistake. It's the space where your real work begins. Because you weren't meant to disappear into the noise. You were meant to notice it, to question it, to speak through it. And sometimes just your presence, still honest, grounded, is enough to shake others awake. You're not trying to be different. You're just not interested in being false. And in a world where falsehood is normalized, that alone makes you feel like an outlier. But you're not broken for feeling that way. You're just early. Early to a depth others haven't reached yet. Early to truths they haven't dared to name. You're building something inside you that most people won't even attempt. Not because they're incapable, but because the work is hard. Because the work strips away comfort. Because the work demands truth over peace. But you're doing it anyway. Even when it hurts. Even when it isolates. Even when no one sees. And that commitment changes you. It gives your presence a quality that can't be mimicked. A kind of resonance that lingers long after you've gone. You may not be acknowledged for it, but the world feels it. In the way people quiet around you. In the way strangers confess things they haven't said out loud. In the way rooms feel different when you're in them. You are not here to conform. You are here to reflect, to remind, to reveal, not with force, not with volume, but with the quiet integrity of someone who chose the path of honesty. You are here to hold that space. And holding it, even in solitude, even in silence, is an offering the world desperately needs. The ache you carry, the one that tells you you're different, disconnected, or too much, isn't an ache at all. It's a signal, a sign that your soul is still alive in a world that's gone numb. A sign that you haven't given up on truth, that you haven't surrendered to imitation, that you still believe in something deeper even when it hurts. And yes, that belief may cost you relationships. It may leave you out of conversations. It may make you the one who always sees too much and says too little. But that belief also protects your inner life. It protects your ability to feel wonder, to stay curious, to create meaning, to connect beyond appearances. So the next time you feel like you don't belong, remind yourself, maybe you weren't meant to. Maybe your presence isn't here to blend in, but to awaken. Maybe your discomfort isn't a flaw, but a compass pointing you away from what's easy and toward what's real. Let others chase what's popular. Let them gather where it's loud. You are building something quieter, stronger, something that won't collapse when the applause fades, something that doesn't need permission to exist. And when that something finally meets someone who sees it, who feels it, who recognizes its language without translation, it will be worth every step you took in solitude. There's something you carry that most people can't explain, not even to themselves. They sense it before they see it. It's not in the way you dress, or how you speak, or what you do. It's in the air around you, in the way time feels different when you're nearby. It's something people notice without noticing, something they feel long before they understand. You exist differently, and because of that, people act differently around you. Some open up instantly, telling you things they've never said out loud. Others withdraw, uneasy but unsure why. And a few seem almost irritated, as though your very presence is a challenge they didn't sign up for. You may spend years wondering why this happens, why people seem to project things onto you, expectations, fantasies, fears, why they hold you responsible for feelings they never speak, why they reach for you with one hand and push you away with the other. This contradiction isn't personal. It's energetic. It's psychological. When someone like you enters a room, you stir something inside others that they don't even realize is dormant. You touch nerves they've trained themselves to avoid. You become a reflection, not of who they pretend to be, but of who they truly are beneath the performance. That reflection isn't always welcome, because for many, seeing their unspoken thoughts, their hidden doubts, their quiet grief, it's too much. It breaks the illusion. It dismantles the comfort of denial. You didn't ask for that role, but you can't unhave it. It's not something you do. It's something you are. You make people aware, even when you're silent. You make them feel something deeper, even when your words are few. The trouble is, when people feel that way, they don't always recognize what's happening. They don't say, "Being around you makes me realize something about myself." No, they say, "You're hard to be around." They say, "You're intense." They say, "I don't know what it is, but something about you makes me uncomfortable." And you begin to wonder if the weight you carry is a flaw, if the discomfort you generate is a failing, but it's not. You're not doing anything wrong. You're simply being more present than others are used to. You're tuned into a frequency that most have forgotten how to hear. And because of that, you become unforgettable. Not because you demand attention, but because your presence shifts something inside people, even if they never admit it. You've likely had relationships that start with fascination. People admire your depth. They're drawn to your groundedness, your calm, your honesty. They say they've never met anyone like you. They marvel at how you listen, how you notice, how you seem to see straight through the masks they've worn for years. And for a while it feels like they finally understand you, that someone has arrived who meets you where you are. But then something changes. The admiration turns to discomfort. The closeness becomes heavy. They start asking you to change, not with their words, but with their energy. They want you to be lighter, less observant, easier to predict. They want you to respond the way others do, to play along, to laugh when things aren't funny, to ignore the undercurrent. And when you don't, they become confused, sometimes angry, sometimes distant. It's not that they stopped caring. It's that your depth illuminated something in them they weren't ready to see. You didn't betray them. You simply refused to betray yourself. You didn't change. They did. Or rather, they revealed the limits of how much reality they could tolerate. This cycle happens not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. You are a reminder. You are a threshold. Being around you makes people feel like they have to step into something more real or step away entirely. And so you end up watching people walk away again and again, not with malice, not with cruelty, just with that familiar wordless discomfort. And it hurts, because you know how deeply you showed up. You know how much you held, how much you offered, how much of yourself you made available, not as a transaction, but as truth. And still, they leave. Still they flinch. Still they fade. You might start believing you're the problem, that if you were just a little more predictable, a little less sensitive, a little more palatable, maybe they'd stay. But that belief is a lie rooted in a culture that fears authenticity, a culture that prefers agreeable masks over inconvenient truth. You are not too much. You are simply not afraid to be whole, and wholeness in a world built on fragmentation is misunderstood. There's a reason you often feel like you're carrying something others can't see, a pressure, a weight, a sense of responsibility for things unspoken. You're not just feeling your own emotions, you're feeling the room. You're tracking the tone behind the words, the glances between lines of dialogue, the tension beneath someone's smile. You don't do this consciously. It's not a trick or a method, it's your natural state. But that state takes energy, and it requires space. You need more quiet than most, not because you dislike people, but because you're constantly absorbing what they cannot hold. Solitude becomes not just a preference, but a necessity, not because you're escaping, but because you're processing, releasing, resetting. This might mean that you retreat more often, that you turn down invitations, that you find large gatherings draining. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're managing a sensitivity that isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You've probably noticed that when people are around you, they feel compelled to reveal things. They say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," or "I never talk about this with anyone." That's not random. That's not a coincidence. That's the energy you carry. It doesn't force people open. It makes it impossible for them to keep hiding. This isn't about healing others. You're not a guide or a guru. You don't need to take responsibility for their growth. But your existence creates a space where masks lose their grip, where illusions unravel, where people face themselves, and sometimes they mistake that space for danger. Not everyone will say thank you. In fact, most won't. They'll remember you without knowing why. They'll replay your words in quiet moments. They'll think of something you said when they're alone, when it finally lands, when they're ready. You may never know the impact you've had, but it's there. It ripples out quietly, subtly, changing more than you'll ever witness. Your job is not to chase validation. Your job is to remain true to the vibration you were built for, to stay rooted in your own rhythm, even when it doesn't match the world around you. You are not here to become easier to understand. You are here to understand yourself so completely that misunderstanding doesn't shake you. Yes, people will continue to be drawn to you and confused by you. Some will come closer than ever before, only to retreat faster than you expect. Some will misinterpret your silence, your stillness, your presence. But those who are meant to meet you as you are, without reshaping you, will come. And when they do, it will feel like exhaling after years of holding your breath. You don't need the crowd. You don't need everyone to get it. You just need to honor what's real for you. That realness will act as a filter. It will remove what isn't aligned. It will attract what is. And while it may take time, it will bring you into contact with the kind of connection you've always known was possible. You may always feel like you walk with one foot in this world and one foot in another, like you live in a place between, half immersed in daily life, half listening to something quieter, deeper, more elusive. That in-between space isn't a flaw, it's your gift. It allows you to translate what most people never hear. It allows you to feel what others have forgotten. It makes you a bridge between the seen and the unseen. And bridges are not meant to be destinations. They are meant to connect, to carry others from one side to another. You are not here to become like everyone else. You are here to remind people who they were before the noise, before the pretending, before they learned to be afraid of their own truth. So if your life feels like a constant pull between presence and distance, between solitude and connection, between being known and being misunderstood, that's not failure. That's the landscape of someone walking their path with integrity. Not everyone will join you there, but you were never meant to lead the masses. You were meant to embody the message. You were meant to be the quiet echo of something deeper, something ancient, something real. And even if no one ever fully sees what you carry, even if the world continues to mislabel your silence, even if the ones you love most sometimes walk away, you are not alone. You are simply rare. And rarity is never easy to hold up, but it is always worth it.